Welcome, everybody. Thanks for joining. We're going to have a few seconds to allow people to fully enter the room. Greetings, everybody. It's so much fun watching people enter a room, I can't tell you. So we're going to start fairly promptly, but let's not be too cruel. Let's have a few minutes just to get the numbers going here. I can see some familiar names, at least in the room. That's reassuring to me. This session, hi Sarah, the session's about fake engagement, ensuring consultation integrity. So hopefully you're in the right place. I'm sure that this session is going to be recorded. So if you have got colleagues who want to look at this after the event, then I'm sure we'll be able to send you the slides or at least share. Just don't feel like you're going to get left out. It is a beautiful day out there after all. Hello, Jonathan. Yes, let's hope you're not fakes. That would be terrible. Good. Yeah, thank you. This session definitely be recorded. Good. Okay, so I'm going to make a fairly prompt start just because I think that's fair to the people who've joined early. Good afternoon. So fake engagement, ensuring consultation integrity. That is where we're going today. Let me just clear out some of my windows to make this easier for me. For those of you who don't know me, my name is Fraser, so I'm going to be running the webinar today. We've got approximately 1 hour. That should be plenty. I am the Government Success Manager for the UK and Ireland. So this session will have a bit of a British flavour, but I think the topic is probably, well, it's certainly relevant to anyone who lives in a democracy. I can see people are already using the chat. That's great. I encourage you to do that, to say hello to each other, to say hello to me. Maybe, stick in your thoughts. I can't promise to keep looking in that chat. So I will periodically, I will peer in there, but my colleague Soren is in the room, so he will help facilitate the chat. We'll also have time right at the end to talk about anything. So we've got a Q&A session at the end. If you've got some really pertinent questions, then save those and we'll try and answer them, or I'll try and answer them as best I can. Okay, here we go. So what are we going to cover? Well, we've got 4 things. We're going to look at what fake engagement is. So we're going to look at a definition of fake engagement. And we will try and look at least how fake engagement manifests. We're going to look at the patterns of fake engagement, and I'll show you some examples, some things that made it into the press. And then reactively, what we, both Go Vocal and yourself, can do about it. So we'll wrap the session up with some good practices in terms of how you might analyze, how you might report confidence in your results. And I will always try and link that back to what the Go Vocal platform can do. And as I said, there will be this final section on Q&A. So that's our hour gone, okay? For those of you who are new to us and don't know about Go Vocal, we are a leading software as a service company. We offer a fully featured consultation engagement platform that's used across the world. You can see some of the big names on this slide, some of the names of governments that are our customers. Over 500 government bodies in total, including some of the major cities of the world. I don't know if Dublin are here today, but lots of different types of customers, but tend to be local government. We've reached over 2 million citizens to date, so impact's important to us. The platform is being used in many different ways, from very simple consultations with questionnaires and surveys to kind of more ambitious participatory budgeting, geospatial consultations, crowdsourcing projects, you name it. I'm not going to go into the accolades too much, but we do have a deep sense of social responsibility, and that includes our B Corp certification. So we're very proud of that. For me, though, I think our standout feature is our ability to innovate. We were one of the first companies to launch AI sense making in our platform, and I think you'll probably see, the flavor of innovation around fake engagement as I go through the slides. In summary, then, the platform is an end-to-end solution. It allows you to collect views. It allows you to manage those concurrent consultations, turn those views then into actionable insights for decision makers. We're all about improving decision making. So turning back to the topic, my first question of the day is going to be whether anybody has spotted anything fake yet. And, I promise I'm real, but I just wondered if we've got any very good detectives in the room. Anyone see anything fake? Looking at the chat here. Okay, well, I'm going to tell you, I did actually use AI to create my biography, my bio picture here. You can probably tell it's a much smarter representation of me in every single way. So, fakes do creep into everything we do. But what is fake engagement? When does it occur, apart from when I stick it in a presentation? Well, to help me understand the scale of the problem, I'm going to encourage you to use the chat now. I'd like you to write in if you've ever experienced this as part of your consultation or engagement work. And I'd like you to include instances where there might be a campaign response. I'm going to look back at the chat after you've compiled your own thoughts there. So for now, I want to classify a campaign response as fake engagement. Even though they were genuine people, I think this topic is as much about responding in a fake way or a contrived way as it is not being a real human, okay? So I consider that there are different levels of fake. 100% a total fake might be AI. It might be a response, it might be a bot. And at the moment, a lot of people are talking about synthetic users. Okay, so a synthetic user might be an AI-generated profile that simulates the characteristics or behaviors of a real user. Now, if you just ponder that for a second, that could be very helpful. You could have the voice of nature synthesized, which is probably something we couldn't do without AI. But that's typically not what we're looking for during consultations. We want genuine views from genuine people who are eligible to respond. Just looking in the chat to see if anyone has experienced this. Jonathan here says, people submitting multiple responses and pretending to be family members. Quite a clever tactic. Yep, I could imagine that's a very common one. Sarah, consulting on exclusion zones around abortion clinics, and got some fakes there. What's interesting in that scenario for me is like the sensitivity of the topic, perhaps. Jonathan again, business customers complete the survey, dozens of responses, just clicking yes and no. Absolutely, I see this a lot where we get people respond in a pattern because they're prodded or they're told to do so. And Arthur there, people sort of downvote everything, very distinct grammar. So someone who's literally gone in and had a bit of mischief in terms of, downvoting maybe everything apart from their own contribution. I think that just demonstrates to me that this is a real thing, and whether you are noticing this happen or not is perhaps a better question. So what is fake engagement? Well, I think the first thing to say is that it's not just a digital problem. I remember years ago looking at paper petitions, and people were saying to me, look, the problem we've got with paper petitions is that I've got Daffy Duck, I've got Minnie Mouse signing these things, and there's kind of no way to understand whether that's the person's real name or in fact that they're just taking the mick. That is a big problem with petitions, because if there's a threshold to reach in order to do something and you're on the balance of the threshold, and then you have to reject responses, the petition doesn't make it. So this can have real serious consequences. But I'm going to argue that actually we do have more safeguards in the digital channel. So I believe that because of all the metadata, all of the other insights that you provide online, we can spot fakes easier. Although the counter argument is that online makes it easier because you're hidden behind the internet, because you can. So what is fake engagement? Well, a definition I'm going to put to you is in the slide here. An attempt to disrupt or manipulate the consultation process to skew the outcome or cause embarrassment. And quite rightly, this tends to occur when the stakes are high. So remember that example in the chat there about abortion clinics. Could be, a very salient, important consultation about closing facilities, something like that. Equally, fake responses are most damaging when there are the fewest number of genuine responses, because what happens, everything gets skewed and biased, right? And then the third point there is about, the circumstances. So sometimes this is an automated attempt to damage your consultation, but often it's actually orchestrated. So there is a person, a leader, a campaign that gets in the way. Now, you could say, all right, if I want to tackle this, how do you determine if the stakes are high? You could sit around and think about who might start a campaign. In my experience, when I've seen this happen, the people that tend to start those campaigns are often people who have some sort of knowledge or deep knowledge of the issues. They may even have the inside track. So it could be like the ex-service head of a library, something like that, in a library's reconfiguration consultation. And of course, you've got the people who are most negatively impacted by the outcome. They are likely to challenge the process because they don't like what might happen. So one way you could assess whether your consultation is likely to be vulnerable to this is use a risk matrix. I've got one in the slide, and I've just used 5 criteria here. What's the type of change? What's the scale of the impact? What are the political implications? What's the proximity of issues? In other words, has this topic come up before? Have you consulted on it recently? And what's the resistance to change? If you took this kind of approach, arguably, you could score each consultation on a low, medium, high basis, and then you could put in the extra safeguards as you need them. But I guess you kind of know in your bones if you're going to get resistance over a consultation, whether it's going to be salient. So, there are certain topics, low traffic neighborhoods, reduction in services, anything to do with schools or parking or bins, there will probably be an amount of resistance. So it's not necessarily going to be a good news consultation where this happens the most. That's perhaps obvious. So I think a great place to start when you're running a high profile consultation is to understand if there is a campaign group, okay? And this might not be right at the outset. The campaign might start a couple of weeks in. So you want to be monitoring that during the dialogue phase. I have seen clients who run a digital audit of existing conversations and existing digital spaces and existing digital influencers before they start their consultations. And the purpose, it's almost like a stakeholder mapping in the digital domain. The purpose is to keep an eye on those people, what they say, and maybe even ask them to help. So my view is, if there is a campaign, it's worth having some ears in those places. Now, I was lucky enough to get involved in a very controversial consultation for Calderdale CCG around the reconfiguration of hospitals in Huddersfield and Halifax. So these are the blue images you see on your screen. This was about the proposal was to move A&E or to remove A&E from one of those places. Should it be Halifax or should it be Huddersfield? And you can imagine quite a lot of uproar because people didn't necessarily understand the reconfiguration. And it sounds like a scary prospect, doesn't it? Losing your A&E. Well, in this particular instance, there was an amazing campaign. So you see some of the images here. The campaign, they launched a website. They had loads of celebrity endorsements. They had a fundraising system so people could fundraise the judicial review. They even had their own ringtone. So when the campaigners turned up in town or whether they turned up to a public meeting, all of their ringtones went off and, it was chaos. The point here is that actually it can be quite hard to compete against the sort of online presence that these campaign websites have, but at least you need to be the ears in there. Another problem is that even if there's no campaign, digital channels, they really accelerate that misinformation. So, you can imagine your local newspaper online, the thread, the kind of things that go on in there, the misinformation, the things that people think are happening, getting out of control. The same can happen with social media. So my view is that if you're in a dialogue phase, I think you should be signposting people to the correct sources of information. And sometimes that might even be signposting people to the correct consultation, right? So, just imagine you could have a fake consultation or a consultation which is run by the campaign group, which people misinterpret for the official consultation. So I think there's something about branding as well that goes, branding and trust that goes with all of this. Doesn't necessarily help when you've got community assets who are running consultations with you. In this case, there were community assets and they were misinformed and they sort of also spread a bit of misinformation. I think the jury's probably out whether you should engage with campaigners. My view, though, is personally, I think it's helpful. I think if you find a campaigner or a campaign, if you invite them in to a private conversation, I think it's more constructive, and I think you might be able to, set the rules a bit fairer at the outset. But I appreciate some people just don't want to do that. So, all right. So, why are we vulnerable to fake engagement? Well, I think it's because of a number of reasons. I think we don't fully verify our consultees. So typically we only verify their email. And I know that's different for some places in the world. Some of our customers have, electronic ID. I don't think we tend to specify who's ineligible to participate. I don't think that helps. So it could be that, you don't explicitly say Australians can't participate and AI bots can't participate. It's quite hard as well to detect the fake engagement, especially if you don't have any assistive tech. We don't tend to have any rules in place for dealing with it when it does happen. So faking's not a crime. There's no repercussions. The world's not going to break. And you've got the shield of the internet. I said that earlier, that doesn't help. So we don't have these rules. Citizens aren't even aware of the implications of being part of a campaign. So they don't realize they're doing anything wrong necessarily. We don't report on the confidence or accuracy of our results, and decision makers don't really demand that we do. And then finally, we've got this compounded problem that AI is getting even more convincing. So generating what seems to be a good response is so much easier. So what about the culprits? I alluded to this a little earlier. I think often the people who manipulate consultations have their own agenda. Okay, so they have, they want a particular outcome clearly, or they tend to have some kind of soft power, or even, followers. So that's why I mentioned influencers. Sometimes that can be members of parliament. I mean, I've seen, political interest too. On this particular slide, you'll see examples I've just captured off Facebook of instructional videos. So this video was showing people how to respond to a questionnaire, how to fill out that questionnaire, which options to select, what to write. And this is really annoying. I mean, the good news here is that there are then patterns in those responses that you could potentially detect. If I was, really stretching my mind, I guess you could say at the far end of the spectrum, there's, bad actors or bad member states. I mean, we've seen information warfare just before the Ukraine war. I really feel like we have to defend our democracy at the moment, and I'm certain this is an open door to anyone who wants to create even more mischief. Let's look at some examples, because I think that's always nice to see. Well, it is nice if you're not them. It's nice to see how this has played out when it has happened. I've got 3 newspaper clippings for you, and there are lots of examples that make it to the news. Some of the most horrific are actually when people in the consultation team have manipulated results. I mean, that's really tragic. I'm not going to suggest anyone's going to go there. But on this screen, we've got 2 consultations that had to disregard responses, which was a source of much embarrassment. So in one of these cases, an elected member came forward early and said, look, this has been a great success. We've had hundreds of thousands of responses, only to have to retract later that actually there were just a handful of genuine responses. But at least they've been spotted, okay? The most alarming example was probably the one on the right here, the Garda submission. This was a consultation in York where a fake submission had been received by a key stakeholder. So, key stakeholder, what I call an organizational response, saying, of course, the exact opposite to what you might imagine they would say. So my gut feeling here is that if you get an organizational response from, the RSPCA or someone who claims to be representing others, that warrants greater checks or safeguards. And if my product team are listening, maybe there's an opportunity for blockchain. So if nothing else, my tip for you would be check these organizational responses. I can see people are chatting. That's all good. I will go and have a look in there in a second. So don't feel like you're talking to yourself. So next question on my mind is like, how do we spot the fakes? And this is what the academics will say. They will say that common characteristics are fakes are 12 times more active than normal. They tend to provide longer responses. They're rated more often as helpful, and they use more negative adjectives and negative words. Now, that's nice. That's nice to have, but I think the trouble with this is it's still very anecdotal, isn't it? I might add to the list that sometimes you get responses which just sound like AI, and some people can detect that. There are websites you could copy paste open-ended text to see if it really is AI. I personally think that if you're running a consultation, you should have some rules like, maybe it's not fair game to use AI to formulate the essence of your response, but the jury's out. You've probably seen this kind of thing play out in Facebook. So you imagine you open your Facebook feed, someone says like, can you recommend a builder? And immediately the first couple of comments are, Fred West, that's a bad example, isn't it? George Best, he is a great builder. And the next comment is, yes, absolutely. He fixed my plugs and he built me a wall in 2 seconds flat. And the problem with those threads is that actually, the first couple of people to respond tend to be manipulating the reader because it's the first thing that you read into believing that that's the truth. Whereas in actual fact, I think if you scroll through the comments that come in later, they tend to be more genuine. So you can even get these biases that get introduced by people gaming threads, okay? But all of this is a bit speculative. I don't think you could use any of this academic stuff to reject a consultation response. I think that would be, a bit far-fetched. So we're sort of solutionizing now. How could we prevent or reduce fake engagement? This is probably the important bit, isn't it? I rather like the idea of education. I think it's something we don't do enough of. And I've gleaned this particular bit of text from the Association of Consultation Engagement Professionals, their Think campaign. I think fundamentally that we need to learn and teach people critical thinking skills. And this is going to, that skill itself will break through all of the problems we're having with AI in every single part of our lives. But in this example, basically, this bit of text is saying, don't be influenced by by anyone else or what they've told you or how they've told you to respond. Can you see the bigger picture? So are you being like kind of selfish in your views? I think that's quite important to cut through all the NIMBYism. Consultation is not a vote. I think that's important that people realize if they do try and skew consultations, it's not binding, it's just causing annoyance. And the final thing there is we will notice if you're being a fake, and there is a risk that your response will be rejected on certain conditions. So education, I would put number one. And you can imagine you might want to adopt a set of words like this, or you could adopt a set of words like this at the outset of your consultation or in the about pages on your platform. So let's look at the safeguards. Let's start with the non-technological ones. This is not an exhaustive list, all right? And these things, I suppose, are outside of any platform you might have. I've mentioned education. The other one is like self-reporting. You could call it whistleblowing. I mean, one time used to have whistleblowing telephone lines. Maybe this is more of a technological one, but certainly you could rely on the community to self-regulate. That's a possibility. Deterrence and warnings, I suppose you could mix those in with education, but I do believe that kind of spotting or calling people out is quite helpful. Transparency, I think we need to get better at reporting levels of confidence in our results. I've mentioned that early, but I'd love to see more of that happening in output reports. Awareness, I believe that's very important. So, this idea that you are monitoring the debate, monitoring the influencers, monitoring the campaign groups. I know it's a lot of effort, but if you are quick to react and respond, I think you're going to reduce the amount of fake that you get. Random sampling is a very powerful one. Sometimes I see in consultation questionnaires the question which is like, do you mind if we contact you about the views that you've provided? And if someone says yes, they provide their contact details. And the idea here is that whilst you might be phoning someone to talk about the views that they provided, probably what you are doing is instead just confirming that they are their genuine views and that they're a real person. So if you have this random sampling going on, you can then look at confidence. And then finally here is comparing other data. So if you've got an electoral roll, you've got someone's name, you know their address, you could do a very crude lookup. That is not impossible. But again, potentially a lot of work. So let's then shift. Let's look at the technological safeguards. And as I said, many of them are in the Go Vocal platform. Going to go through again each of those. The first one being pattern detection. So do you remember the example I showed you where someone had a video and they said, choose option A, then write bin bags, then choose option C? Well, you could find patterns in longer questionnaires where you could safely assume that someone's responded because they were prompted to do so in a particular way. Some people call certain responses straight liners. So if you've got someone who responds A, then it might be that they're just clicking through or they're just hurrying. It may be that this is a pattern of a bot. Slightly harder to kind of understand the intentions. I'm told you get 40% in an exam if you're a monkey, and that's the kind of example that this is about, pattern detection. Pattern detection might go as far as looking at the time someone takes to respond. So if you've got a questionnaire that's 10 questions long and someone's completed it in 2 seconds, then that would raise suspicions in my head. Then we have what we call here a fingerprint. And a fingerprint is looking at a number of non-response type pieces of data. So, for example, your IP address, that's your a number which relates to your connection on the internet. And then look at the browser that you use, if it's Internet Explorer or Chrome or whatever, and try and bring those things together to understand if that person is real or not. By the way, we don't collect IP addresses, all right? We do collect them, but we encrypt them, so we don't know what they are, but we can detect the patterns. So this is more of a a clever technological solution. Throttling is another approach. Throttling is basically reducing the number of responses someone can create in a period of time. So it might be that you can only only place one comment in a thread per day, and that's obviously going to slow down the process of any fakes. It might be that if we notice something is happening that's suspicious, that we can slow down the rate at which participation happens. That can be quite an effective strategy. If you are registered in the GoVocal platform, then that means that typically you can only respond to a survey once. I suppose that's a kind of example of throttling. My favorite probably on this slide is AI. So as you know, we have ask a question of open-ended data feature in our AI module. And I rather like the prompt, were there any duplicate or near duplicate responses? Because that's not a prompt which asks for attitudinal data. It is asking about patterns in the data. And you'll often find this is very reliable. You'll find that AI will tell you, oh, there's nothing really similar in here, but actually people did say these sentences, or conversely, there were 50% of the responses were exactly the same. So use that, it's very powerful. Then we have tokens or invites. This is really where you're inviting people in advance, authenticated people to participate. It might be you send them an invite from the platform or a token or something like that. There are also third-party checks you could do. I think about credit reference agencies. It's often quite easy by taking someone's credit card, charging them 0 to actually identify them. Something we don't do, but it's interesting. If you're really clever, some people deploy what we call behavioral assessment. So this is about looking at someone's typing speed or their mouse patterns. You could imagine if you're a robot and you're responding to a consultation, you are not going to be scrolling your mouse around the screen. You're just going to be jumping straight to a button, jumping straight to another button. Very clever. And then finally, I put social login. So social login is basically, instead of having or creating an account in an online platform, you use your Gmail or your Facebook account instead. Now, believe it or not, I've tried it. It is very hard to fake a Facebook account. And one of the reasons is that if you have a Facebook account, sometimes Facebook asks the people in your network whether the pictures of you are really you. So they use the network to kind of authenticate everyone else. If you've got a spare moment, go and see if you can create a fake Facebook account. It's a lot of fun. And Facebook accounts, yeah, typically linked to one phone number, for example. So some interesting ideas here. I think there are things that we can do and things that you can do. So on pattern detection, one idea might be, if you've got a questionnaire, you could ask a question like, what's your favorite animal? Maybe someone selects, I don't know, pigs. You could have a question much further on in that questionnaire, which says, rate these animals most favorite to least. And if someone doesn't put pigs as their most favorite animal, then there's a bit of contradiction that's going on. So I have seen people design questionnaires with contradictory questions just to catch people out, just to see whether they are actually telling the truth, and those things marry up. Now, all of this is great, but there is a kind of cautionary tale here, and that's where you get false positives. So I have seen, for example, a teacher, in fact, who sent out loads of paper questionnaires to their students. The students filled them out. End of the day, got all the paperwork back together. The teacher sat and typed in or transposed each of those responses one after the other after the other. And you can imagine in this example, we've got a throttling issue because those responses are coming in one after the other. We've got a fingerprint issue because it's from the same computer and from the same browser. And, you know, it sets off alarm bells, but actually it's genuine. So all of this is still not foolproof. Now, getting close to the end, in platform examples, you may or may not have seen we have a wonderful community monitor feature. There is a setting now in under access rights, sorry, called advanced spam detection. And this is basically about using that fingerprinting technique on logged out users to try and circumvent any spam or fake engagement. So these things are creeping into the platform. There is a chance we will get this in surveys as well. So it's not there yet, but we are taking this very seriously. We are thinking about ways that we can overcome this technologically. Okay, final push here before we take some questions. What do you do when you get or suspect you've got fake engagement? What are the remedies? Well, I've got a 6-step plan for you here. For me, it's really less about cleaning the data and more about separating it out. So I think the first thing you would do, or I would do, is understand the severity of the situation. Is this, something which is out of control, or is this something which is manageable? And then step 2, I would say, is what can we do now? Could we provide a gate? Could we stop our activity or pause and try and get our heads around this? Or do we need to start again? I mean, that could be, unfortunately, that could be a necessary step, although it rarely ever happens. If you catch this early, and you can stop it from happening in the future, then the best approach is to ring fence the results. So what you do is you create multiple analyses. You have one analysis, for example, with the campaign or fake responses. You have another without them, and you have another everything combined. And in that way, in having the 3 analyses, that's assuming there's only one episode, then you can start to see if that campaign response or if the fake engagement made a difference. Moving to number 5 there, what tends to happen actually is that the people who analyze these consultations tend to treat campaign responses as a single response. And that's quite clever because what it does is it basically de-amplifies the campaign. So there is validity, but it's only kind of valid once. And then they would probably supplement that with some words that say, by the way, we detected, that there was a campaign, which is my point number 6. I think it's important that we start to report levels of confidence in our output reports. I would love to see that happen. I imagine that maybe after today, we will. That is it from me. I hope you've enjoyed that. It's been 50 minutes. Wow, 50 minutes of your time. I really hope that you've taken in some of the tips. I noticed that you've been busy talking here in the chat. So I appreciate that, but I'm going to shift over to the Q&A. I can see we've got 3 questions here at least. I'm happy to go straight into that. So let's take this in order. When it says to identify fake responses, they are rated as helpful. What do you mean? So literally, I mean if a response is like, thumbed up. So if you have a thumb up, thumb down situation in a thread, that the fakes tend to be the ones that people have gravitated to giving a thumb up, is what the academics say anyway. Next question here, with education to prevent fake responses, should we include these reflective questions on the consultation survey? Well, I suppose the problem with putting them up front in the survey itself is that it sort of drains the amount of time. And I think I would prefer to see them somewhere else in an online platform, in a website. So not necessarily bang in front of you in the questionnaire as it goes through, but maybe on the as a link on the project page, with a clear page of its own, which talks about your approach, your rules, and so forth. Are there technological safeguards? Implement on the platform? Yes, we do have a number of those safeguards running in our system. Some of those were hypothetical, but we do have a number of those safeguards that are built into GoVocal. I think particularly the prompts, the AI prompts, that could be a very useful idea for you. You get that feature if you're a premium customer. What else have we got here? One from Arthur. Many people are resistant to engage in campaigns can amplify certain people's voices. The risk that threatening all of those responses fake isolates them. I mean, yes, you don't want to go into heavy-handed. I think that's fair to say. And let's face it, this is a reasonably rare occurrence which happens in those high-stakes consultations. But I do feel like it's necessary people understand that consultation is not a vote, because I think if they get over that simple premise, then they'll realize that campaigning is it's a bit pointless and it's a bit selfish, because you are drowning out other people's responses effectively. Got another question here from Elaine. Talk about reporting levels of confidence. Are you referring to technical calculations of confidence? Are you referring to including a paragraph which explains why there can be confidence in the findings? I am actually going to gravitate towards a mathematical technical calculation. So I know that's really difficult to do, but I would like to see, we are 90% sure. I mean, you could say we've got medium, low, or high, right? But I think you may be able to get to a point where you can say I've got a high degree of confidence in the results. And if you haven't, then why not? Basically, I think the explanation is going to be quite important. So I'm not sure I gave a great answer there, but I'd love to see a mathematical explanation here. Okay, I think that's all the questions. Oh, we got another one. Great. Do you feel that avoiding exact numbers mitigating the impact of fake responsive? Not saying 40% felt positive. Yeah, tricky one. I see a lot of misreporting of data in consultation reports. So this can come down to even at a single question level. If you've got a yes, no, don't know, then there is a margin of error in the yes and no. And people sometimes misinterpret a yes for a yes because actually they're not taking into account the don't knows. So this can happen very accurately, very precisely, question by question. Overall, though, in terms of fake engagement, the trouble here is it's very hard to put a number on things, isn't it? It's very hard to be certain. It's very hard to give an exact percentage, which is why, I'm definitely going towards the high, medium, low. Will it put people off? I think it would put people off if they didn't have these safeguards in place, and then we got the position where you go into the news and the whole thing was an absolute shambles. So I take the counter argument there. Okay, well, look, we got just 5 minutes to go. You've all been very patient. Um, I'm going to answer that last question, Jonathan, because I think I should. Is there a tendency to ignore the campaigns that support your policy? Wow. I guess it depends how much you're getting paid, Jonathan. I mean, uh, you could say, I mean, you see this with petitions, that there are um, petitions and anti-petitions. And, you know, I guess there are places where people are looking for support. Typically, actually, I'd say a lot of options-based consultations are looking for a support about a change or support about a preferred option. So, of course, it's going to be tempting to ignore um, campaigns that support emotion, but I think you're right to bring it up. So, absolutely, you do need to look at the campaigns which go for and against any proposal. Good. Okay. Well, I think we're going to call it a wrap. Thank you so much for attending. As I said, hopefully there's something in all of that which you can take away with you and think about and implement. Really nice to see you. Please get in touch if any of that has raised alarm bells or if you want to know more. And we look forward to seeing you on the next amazing webinar.